From the Bent Pixel Studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Phone Booth Fighting, your twice weekly and absolutely free podcast covering the world of mixed martial arts and so far beyond with that guy.
Frank Mir, sorry.
The two-time UFC heavyweight champion. Hopefully, as you get older, Frank, that doesn't become more and more of a necessity. I hope we don't get to that point.
Yeah, it's starting to kind of get there now.
Frank Mir.
Yeah.
And, of course, the current Bellator heavyweight contender. We'll talk about some Bellator here in a little bit as well as some UFC. And this guy, me, Richard Hunter, the court jester of the Phone Booth Fighting comedic duo. We've got a big UFC to talk about, some big UFC news to talk about, some Bellator news as well. Actually, in fact, Frank, I was thinking about this as we sat down in the studio today. We've been so guest intensive the last few episodes. If you've missed any episodes, go back and check them out. Our last episode, we had UFC fighters James Vick and Sadiq Yusuf on. Vic, by the way, was on fire. We got to talk about what he did at the UFC press conference, by the way, too, hyping up his fight here in a couple of weeks against Justin Gaethje. That was our last episode. The episode before that, the backyard barbecue with Donald Cowboy Cerrone and his entire biker gang. That was a very special event. Before that, we had Billy Bob Thornton and his band, the Boxmasters. I mean, this was all within the span of about 2 weeks. When we sat down to do the show tonight, I was like, man, this is going to be you and me talking fights for an episode for a change. We can
different pace for a change.
Yeah, we like the guests, but it's also good to just have a romantic podcast for two, I think, as well. So I saw the fights. You saw the fights. How was your weekend, by the way? We didn't get to watch the fights together because I had a very metal weekend. I had to go see Whitesnake, and then Whitesnake was done at 10 o'clock, which was just in time for me to rush over to Vamped here in Las Vegas to see Jeff Tate, the former lead singer of Queensryche, perform their seminal album, Operation Mindcrime, in its entirety. I just went ahead and assumed I wasn't going to run into you over there.
Yeah, unless you invited me, I'm not probably going to be there.
Yeah. And you should come out one night, though. It'd be fun to see you over there at Vamped. It's like a whole club full of people that look like me. And
it'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun. What did you watch did you watch the fight with Travis?
Yeah, his daughter's birthday was
Yes. Happy birthday to Olivia. Travis, our original producer here on Phone Booth Fighting. If you go that far back with us, of course, nowadays we have Porno Mikey. Not today, by the way. He's off working. He's shooting somewhere. Shooting somebody or a couple of somebody's probably a lot hotter than us. But our original producer, who we love so much, Travis, he did a little. So what do you do? Birthday party and then
we went to Crystal Palace,
fights?
Did some skating.
Mm-hmm.
I actually made a couple rounds.
Oh yeah, you got on roller skates?
I did. Well, because Cage at first kind of wasn't, and I start to notice that Cage imitates me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
His sons and fathers will do.
Yeah.
And so Bella and Ronan jump out there, and so I'm like sitting there, and Cage is like, nah, he's kind of being cool, and I'm like, I'm not too cool. I'm just tired. Mm-hmm. It's been a long week of training. The idea of skating around in a circle didn't seem ideal to me at the moment. But then when I realized he wasn't going to, I was like, well, I'm going to skate, and then I got him to get on skates.
Yeah.
So,
do you find yourself skating in fight stance just by instinct?
I do a good job because my balance is pretty well, but it's very obvious that I am not a good skater because I was trying to think about that. I think the last time I put skates on, I was in high school. So it'd been a while. So the first couple laps, I was pretty close to the wall.
Yeah.
Making sure, but I didn't eat shit, so we're good.
I had apologized via text to Travis I actually forgot about Olivia's birthday party because he had invited us a couple of weeks back, and I said, "Man, in fact, I think I saw Jennifer's Instagram post about it." And I was like, "Wait a second, oh, that was this weekend." So I texted him. I said, "Oh man, I forgot about the birthday party." And he goes, "Oh, don't worry about it. It wasn't a ton of fun for adults." And I said, "Please, sir, let me tell you, I have a vivid memory of a roller rink couple skating with my first girlfriend to Chicago's Hard to Say I'm Sorry." And if you're familiar with the tune, it's a ballad, but the extended play, which you didn't often hear on the radio, is at the end, it goes into this real up-tempo horn section part. And they would typically cut that off on the radio because otherwise the song would be like 7 or 8 minutes long. And I never wanted to hear that upbeat part when I was listening on the radio, except in that instance when I was holding my girlfriend's hand, I remember skating around in a circle going, oh, man, I hope they play the long version. Sure enough, when it kicked in, when we get there, gonna jump in the air, I was like, all right.
Now, you never did the rollerblades, though, right? You were always the quad?
You know what? I think I'm so old that they didn't have rollerblades. Back in my day,
you can actually get rollerblade rentals now.
Oh, wow.
So when I went, I remember if you wanted to wear rollerblades at the roller rink, you brought them,
Yeah.
The ones you rented were always the little quad skates. Is that the proper term? Just roller skates.
I think
just
regular
roller skates. So regular roller skates. And then when I first got there, Travis had a pair of rollerblades on. I'm looking, I'm all, oh, do you rollerblades? Oh, no. I'm all, so you bought a pair of rollerblades just for today? Because no, you can rent them. I'm like, no shit,
Yeah.
So then, but then I thought, I was like, nah, I'll get the regular roller skates because I don't want to look like I actually know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I want to be judged as a father that's just going out there with his kids to have fun, not as somebody who's actually trying to, because then it's like, you get put in a different category. I wanted to stay in the amateur league,
Yeah. I don't think I've ever even actually been on rollerblades. I don't think I've ever even had a pair on.
I had a pair when I was younger.
Yeah.
That's when everybody was into street hockey. And
Yeah, I don't think I ever even had any. But anyway, yeah, I would have enjoyed the roller rink. I wouldn't have minded going to do that. That would have been fun.
That was fun. We just sat and hung out, and then afterwards we retired back to Travis's place and then, ordered food, hung out, and put the fights on.
Very nice. Well, I got to catch him on replay as soon as I got home from rocking, and I guess we'll just go in order from top to bottom here. UFC 227 was live from the Staples Center in Los Angeles, California, co-headlined by 2 UFC titles. The main event had TJ Dillashaw defending his bantamweight title against Cody Garbrandt. Of course, it was back in November that Garbrandt took the title away, or rather Dillashaw took the title away from Garbrandt by knocking him out in the second round. This time, Dillashaw did it quicker. He knocked out Garbrandt in the first round, and it was a slugfest while it lasted. That first fight, Frank, which actually went 2 rounds, to me, we talked about this last week in our preview of it, was for that style of fight was just kind of perfection for me because both guys are rocked. Dillashaw was in trouble before Garbrandt was in trouble. It was a real back-and-forth affair, and if it's not going to last very long, it's exciting to see that tale of 2 fights. And those fight styles, my gosh. I mean, Garbrandt who is normally really known for his striking, for his boxing. I mean, that was something that got him to the point, and even getting past Dominic Cruz, who he himself is one of the best at that. But that firefighting style with Dillashaw, I mean, is literally playing with fire. And I wondered, sometimes with these rematches, especially with dynamic initial encounters, sometimes the rematches are a little more tentative. Not the case here. In fact, if anything, it was wilder and probably lasted a shorter amount of time because of it. Both guys were all in, but this was more in the favor of Dillashaw. He outstrikes Garbrandt 34-10, 22-10 on significant strikes. Dropped Garbrandt once before he finished him for good. I mean, that's the story of the fight. Your thoughts?
You know what? I think I still had the fight even after the first fight. When people were asking me, hey, who do you think's going to win? I'm like, shit, I don't know. And I think that my last words right before the fight started, Isabella was talking to me. She says, what do you think? I'm like, well, TJ is a more complete martial artist as far as takedown, strikes, hands, feet, everything. You know what I mean? The guy is good everywhere. Do you know what I mean? I can't pick out a part where I question whether he could fight there or not and not excel. And not where he's just okay there, where he's good everywhere. He really is. And his switch stances and stuff. But then I was like, but the explosive boxing of Garbrandt is his advantage. He has great power and speed with his punches. That throws them. But then, as the fight went on, and in hindsight, listening to them talk and then watching it play out, I realized that Ludwig and Dillashaw, they've seen a flaw in Garbrandt's style, and it comes out because they kept saying the emotional thing. He's in a fight emotional, and I was like, what does that mean? Really, to fight emotional, what is that playing into? And I realized watching it, and my take was on it, when Garbrandt throws 1, 2, 3 punches, his style, he really doesn't make a mistake. He never comes past his knee, really, his chin over his lead leg. His combinations are tight. It's when he throws that fourth punch, and usually that fourth punch is when he's in a brawl with you, which I can see that being related to an emotional response, him wanting to knock your head off. If you watch it, every time he's been hit hard in both fights now, he lurches forward with his body and he flings that right hand as a hook. He normally doesn't do that. If you watch his past fights, and if you watch even during the fights, with Cruz, his hand will move first and he stays behind it and he throws almost a picture perfect right hand. But when he throws in those melees, he has so much power and confidence, and it's almost kind of he abandons a little bit of his protective technique, and he throws. And then because he's so powerful and he comes forward, he's running into punches. And I think what they've seen, and until Garbrandt fixes that one tell, I think Garbrandt or Dillashaw is okay with getting in brawls with him, because he realized, I'll stand southpaw, right side forward, right? And when I see him initiate a combination, I'm going to do a check hook. I'm going to put my weight towards my back foot and throw a hook punch, because I know that he's coming forward with a right hand and he's going to run into it. I don't have to throw it at him. I don't have to reach him, because he's so aggressive on that brawl, on that 3 or 4 punch combination, that when he throws that right hand, his chin's exposed, he throws with his chest first, and he flings it. Now, if he lands it, he's putting all his cards are in 100% power. It's just that he's left open. Because actually, when it first happened and he got knocked down again with the hook the way he did, I was like, I wonder if Garbrandt doesn't have the greatest chin in the world. I'm not saying he has a glass jaw by any stretch of the imaginations, but Dillashaw took a powerful right hand that he walked into and was able to recover. Where you see now that like those are hook shots that are spinning and catching him and hurting him. But then when I was actually this morning at practice, we were talking about it with John Wood, and he said, well, he brought up the fact, he runs into it. I'm like, and that's when I started running through my head. I'm like, you know what? You're right. And if you think about it, Dillashaw said something about when he throws his right hand, I'm going to throw my right hand. When he throws the right hand, we'll throw right hands at the same time. Yeah. I'm like, that's a weird statement. You know what I mean? Like, I've never, in all my years of listening to fights, I've never heard a corner say, or I've never heard another fighter go, okay, when he throws his right hand, you throw your right hand. Beat him to it. I'm all, that's not sound strategy as far as I'm concerned. I'm like, wow, you're going to go first, and then I'm going to try to race you and beat you with the same shot. But now realizing the difference of stances, and because of what exposure, what flaw in the technique that Garbrandt has, I can see now it's like, when he starts to throw his punch, fade back and throw my right, he's going to run into it because he's moving from right to left, throwing that powerful right backside hook.
Yeah. And do you think it's also the kind of thing that it takes an elite level, a champion like Dillashaw to ferret that out?
Yeah,
that
come on.
Well, what I'm saying is that maybe Garbrandt on the climb up, has been able to be a little more adventurous with stuff like that and not get caught.
Well, I think it's accumulation of all things. I think it's, he could have that coach's mind. Him and Dwayne Ludwig could sit back and break down a fight. I mean, I'm sure most of our fans can sit there and watch a fight and break down strategy and go, well, this guy should be doing this. And you're absolutely right. That guy should do this. But doing it while the other guy is not trying to cooperate is a whole different situation. Yeah. So I think that's really what makes Dillashaw special, is that not only does he have the right mind for it, and he has a good camp, and obviously good strategy, but he's just a very good athlete too. So, and he's well trained, so he can sit there and under that kind of composure, under that kind of stress, having Cody Garbrandt, arguably probably the hardest puncher in the bantamweight class, throwing punches at him, and he could sit there and go, okay, well, I'm going to fade back. Even if it comes close, I know that my shot's going to land, and staying in the pocket more, which he kind of did in this fight. If you watch, he had his hands up, but he was much more engaging with the boxing. I think knowing that check hook, that fade back hook was going to catch him. And, that's the part, again, about being a champion, is that we could sit here with X's and O's all day long. I could break down every fighter in the world. All of us can be broken down. No one's perfect. But, now it's like, okay, now which one of us is going to implement the game plan? Who's going to be able to go out there and actually do that against that guy to make sure it actually, follows through?
There was talk after the fight of Joe Rogan brought it up to TJ Dillashaw directly in the post-fight comments about TJ quite possibly being the greatest UFC bantamweight of all time.
It's hard to make that.
It's an interesting conversation to have. First of all, you've got to factor in that the bantamweight division is one of the newer divisions historically to the UFC, so you don't have quite as much history to take into consideration. But I mean, you look at the record, a pair of knockout victories over Cody Garbrandt, a win over John Lineker, a win over Rafael Assunção, the loss to Dominic Cruz.
That's the only problem I have with the argument. I think Dominic Cruz right now probably has a better argument for being considered the best bantamweight of so far of the UFC's the weight class since its creation. His only real defeat that we've seen was by the hands of Cody. Caught him, he beat him up for 5 rounds, and I know that now that TJ beat him back twice, but Dominic has wins over TJ, or has a win over TJ. I think if TJ can get a rematch with Dominic and beats Dominic Cruz, then I'm all in. I mean, right now, I'm not going to argue with you that it's not him, but I'm saying that if another guy says, hey, Dominic Cruz, I'll be like, hey, he has a good point, guys. You know what I mean? Like, those two are in the conversation for the two best. And that being said, one guy has a victory over the other, so it kind of leans that way. So I think if TJ wants to have that moniker, beat Dominic Cruz. You beat Dominic Cruz, and then I'll be on that bandwagon to say that, yes, you are the best bantamweight that we've ever seen.
And that loss was a close fight, too, a split decision loss. So fight of the night performance from both guys. So, yeah, and gosh, you forget about this, but, I mean, the pair of wins over Hen and Barao. Remember that? Remember
that's what really put him on the map.
Oh, God, yeah. Remember when TJ Dillashaw was considered one of the biggest underdogs going against Hen and Barao?
Well, at that point, Hen and Barao, I think, was undefeated for 30 fights.
He had a crazy streak going.
He destroyed Uriah Faber in 1 round. I mean, and Uriah Faber is a legendary top 5 of all time, bantamweight, former WEC champ, basically only ever lost championship fights, that guy is incredible. You know what I mean? Had an incredible career, and then so to see somebody destroy Uriah like that, I thought at that point, I think Hennon was considered pound for pound the best fighter in the world.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I'll tell you what, and that was a defining moment with me and TJ Dillashaw as well in terms of my perception of him for a couple of reasons right around that stretch. One, I mean, just the sheer upset aspect of it aside. With Hen and Barao in that first fight, he was shutting Hen and Barao out on the cards, and he finished him in the 5th round when he didn't need to. I mean, all he had to do was just maintain, and he would have maintained. I don't think Hen and Barao was going to have some Rocky-like comeback, but Dillashaw went for the finish. Then, same thing with Joe Soto, because if you remember that, Soto stepped in short notice because Barao fainted before they could weigh in.
Bathtub type thing.
Finished him in the same sense. Finished him in the 5th round after he was shutting him out on the cards. Then rematch with Hen and Barao, and this time beat him in the 4th. Which, if you look at the same thing that he did with Garbrandt, he improved.
Yeah, he's getting better. No,
he beat him a round earlier than he did the last time.
I thought TJ, if you would have asked me a year and a half ago, I thought it was his style didn't exude a lot of power. I thought it was too much movement. kind of like Dominic Cruz at times, doesn't exude a lot of power. So much movement, they slap the hell out of you, hard to get a hold of them. But as far as sitting down on their punch and finishing somebody, sometimes they leave a little to be desired. TJ of late, has made those improvements. He's was still maintaining that elusiveness of the switch stancing. If you don't know whether he's standing southpaw, orthodox, the kicks, level changes, his takedown ability, his wrestling, and now when he throws punches, you could see that his butt sits down a little bit more in the chair. Yeah. And he throws with his hips more. So he has more power behind his shots, which was probably one of the things I would have, would have been a link, a nick in his armor that I would have called out before, going, well, there's your weakness. There's a weakness that I see. And now it's like, no, he's fixed that, and not only has he fixed it, apparently what you could see, but the results of his fights are telling of that.
Yeah. Very impressive performance by TJ Dillashaw. The upset of the night obviously came in the co-main event with Demetrious Johnson doing something that he has only done a couple of times and not in many years, which is lose. Yeah. He lost a split decision to Henry Cejudo. This a rematch in its own right. First time out, Johnson finished Cejudo in the first round. It was a very quick stoppage. Not quick in terms of a bad stoppage, but the fight didn't last very long. This time around, a totally different fight. 48-47 on the judges' scorecards. One judge did give it to Demetrious Johnson. Just a quick look at the stats here, and I'll get your thoughts, Frank. Demetrious did outstrike Cejudo significantly over the course of the entire fight. 110-71 also bested him in significant strikes, 68-47. Cejudo was credited with 5 takedowns. That was the big difference for him in the fight. Johnson had a lot of success with leg kicks, and that's an aspect of this we should talk about as well. But if you look at the fight metric numbers, to me, the clear rounds for me were 1 and 3. I had those for Johnson based on strikes and kicks. Cejudo was definitely 4 and 5 for me. Round 2 was the debatable round. Rounds 4 and 5, because it's sometimes it's misleading. You look at these stats and you're looking at them across the entire fight, but you got to remember it's scored round by round. Yeah. So 4 and 5, the strike stats were basically even, and that's where, if you're going to give credit for takedowns, that's where that's going to come into play. And then of course we have the next debate, which is yes, but what type of damage are you doing with your takedown? But that second round, Johnson outstruck Cejudo, but by a margin of 15-11, so much closer. Much easier for a judge to go one way or another. Not a robbery in my mind, but definitely a razor-thin margin, definitely a debatable decision. Certainly the case can be made that Johnson, in fact, won it. So with that being said, how did you score it?
I actually had it for Demetrius. I thought
3 rounds to 2, yeah?
Yeah, in fact, actually, I think the 4th round was the one that I was like, okay, he's been on top for so long, maybe we'll give it to him. There wasn't a lot of strikes thrown.
Talking about Cejudo.
Yeah. For Henry. But his takedowns, I didn't really count for anything, because to me, with the effective striking and effective grappling, the first thing they go to is damage, right? And so I never really saw too many shots, and obviously the numbers support this. The punches and kicks that that Demetrius was landing, I can recall several times seeing Cejudo grab his stomach, his leg buckle. So to me, those are damaging strikes. Yeah. I'm trying to think back to, did I ever see Henry land anything on Demetrius quite as often where it looked like, oh, you did damage with that strike?
No.
Right? So strike-wise, damage-wise, I was all for Demetrius. And then with the takedowns, Cejudo did phenomenal. Inside trip takedown. It was awesome to see some of them that he was able to land. But Demetrius is so hard to hold down that he spent 90% of his energy holding him down. Yeah. So even from the ground, a lot of those strikes that got counted for him were the strikes he landed on the ground, which wasn't really a lot. So, I mean, you're also counting, so if you think about those stats, put into those that Dominic Cruz never had a top position in wrestling. So all his striking was landed from on his feet. Significantly stronger shots landed than the ground and pound shots. So the shots also that you're adding in there for Cejudo were some of the pitter-patter shots he threw on the ground. Mm-hmm. He never once really picked his chest up and dropped a bomb where it was like, oh, looks like, Demetrius is hurt. It was more or less, man, this guy is strong, has a great base, and Demetrius can't get out from underneath of him. And I think that if it hadn't been Demetrius, I think the referee probably would have started it up a couple times, especially if it was the fourth round. He got taken down with about 2 minutes left. And there wasn't a lot, it's like, okay, you're not doing much. The bottom guy was actually, Demetrius was doing more as far as trying to use the butterfly guard to sweep. If I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, you're holding on. You're trying to pin him down. And I get it. You're trying to hold him down, but I'm not going to give that credit for winning the round because it's like, okay, you controlled him, but there's no damage being done. Mm-hmm. So actually, after the fight was over with everybody in the room, I was out, that's close. I'm like, I don't think it's even close. I think it's an easy call. Yeah. So I was shocked when they called Cejudo. I'm like, really? Yeah. You can beat someone with just takedowns now again. Are we back to this again? You know what I mean? Like that's basically, if you think about it, Cejudo just won the title off of takedowns. Mm-hmm. Really? I mean, he didn't, even with the takedown, it wasn't like he ever really threatened with anything of significance on the ground as far as submission-wise. Can you remember anything?
No.
Yeah, there was no submission. It wasn't like he locked up a Kimura and almost got it, wrapped his neck, almost had it, head and arm. And then it wasn't like there was a couple times with the ground and pound. I mean, look at look at Demetrius' face when it was done. There wasn't a mark on his face. So he didn't land. I mean, no elbows on the ground, nothing. You couldn't grind him up at all. So that's why I felt that it was I really kind of thought that, honestly, that Demetrius kind of got screwed, to be honest.
Yeah, I think what really hurt Demetrius in this particular fight is contrary to a lot of his other fight, well, pretty much all the other fights that are worth discussing, you either see this clinical dominance on his part, or you see some spectacular finishes, or you at least see en route to that clinical dominance some points of a strong submission attempt. And we didn't really get those. Yeah. His damage was more nuanced on Cejudo, which is what you're talking about. The kicks, and certainly it's a judge's prerogative to see those things, but those things are not as easy, I think, sometimes for a judge to see as, okay, he's got his back, he's got a choke that wasn't quite in, but he held it for, it was defended for 30 seconds or something. Yeah.
But I mean, I think leg kicks are easy to tell. You kick a guy in the leg. I mean, there was how many times? I mean, did we see Cejudo's stance completely buckle? Right. Inside kick, his stance buckled. Outside kick, his knee buckled. I mean, at one point he rolled his ankle in the very beginning of the first round. His leg buckled all the time. He had to keep switching to southpaw to avoid getting any more damage to that left leg. That's why. And then a couple times I can specifically remember 3 or 4 body kicks that made him crunch over, where as a fighter, I'm like, oof, that hurt.
That's true. That hurt. Mean, if you're assessing damage, certainly the damage to that lead leg is the first thing you're going to go to in the fight. It's kind of the only thing you can go to in the fight in terms of there wasn't significant ground and pound, like you said, when he was he was in control of DJ. But nonetheless, DJ loses his title. You look at these numbers coming in. Demetrius, who, by the way, is going to be 32 in a couple of days, a 13-fight win streak that ties for the second longest in UFC history and the most UFC title defenses at 11. That right there, if we're starting to look 25 years in to UFC history at numbers, records that may never be beaten. Like people look at, baseball records like Joe DiMaggio's 57 or 56 game hit streak. Just these things that when people get half the distance to that hit streak, people start talking about it. That's how unreachable it is. I mean, with Demetrius, you don't have anybody. It took him that long to beat Anderson Silva's streak. You don't have anybody even in the conversation. for that.
No, I mean, I think John would have been probably the guy that could do that. But obviously.
No,
John shot himself in the foot.
Yeah.
If John can get it together, I think he's a fighter out there that could possibly push that.
But wait, if he pushes, now just think about this for a second. I'm not totally discounting you. I'm just saying if he did, even at this point, if tomorrow, John Jones is back, he's starting at 0.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got to win the title and then defend it.
Yeah.
11 times. Like, that is a crazy number to be able to think about doing.
Yeah, you're right. It's just so difficult now. Everybody is so good.
Yeah.
It's not like it was 15 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago when camps had holes. I mean, now you see guys, everybody pretty much knows how to do everything. And if you don't do it well, that's just because that's just not your aptitude. It's kind of like, it's like other sports. It's weird. I think finally people are starting to realize that there's always this myth in martial arts that technique and training overcame everything. Well, if you train hard enough, you'll get the technique for it, and the technique means you'll be good at it. And it's like, nah, it doesn't work that way. I hate to break everybody the news, but athleticism and aptitude go a long way. If a guy is big, strong, and fast and has a great nervous system and is calm and cool under pressure, he's not going to have a hard time learning martial arts, and he's going to be very good. Another person can learn the same amount of martial arts. I always try to relate it to people. It's like playing baseball. You and I can go do the same amount of baseball practices from the time we were 5 years old, have a personal coach, take us out there. I see it all the time now. Parents that really think their kid's going to be the next superstar, and they push it, and they take them all these privates, and they push them, and they push them, and they push them. And I don't want to be that asshole to look at them and be like, man, this was decided at birth. Your kid's not going to make it to that level.
Yeah. Is
your kid going to get better? Absolutely. Yeah, if your kid was a 3 and now he's a 7, that's phenomenal. He's never going to be a 10. He wasn't born with the right tendon connection, muscle tissue, lung capacity, whatever you want to call it, the different aptitudes for different sports. Not everybody, regardless of amount of hard work, is cut out to make it in the Major League Baseball, be a pitcher. You know what I mean? Like, it's like some people can do it, some people can't. Same thing with fighting. Just because you like certain aspects, not everybody can be a world-class grappler or a world-class striker. And so, now you see that with the styles of MMA. Before, there was a lot of like, well, you don't even know what the hell you're doing in this area. You're a stand-up gym or you're a grappling gym or, and so.
Sorry, that was my mother calling.
Uh-oh.
We'll get back to her after the podcast. Is my mom calling you now?
No, but it's a good thing.
Has it gotten to that point where when I don't take her calls, she calls? That's what your wife does to me. You don't pick up the phone, she calls me. Now my mom's doing it to you.
No, she just texts. She's going through a drive-through. Do you want anything?
Oh, no, but tell her thank you for asking. That's very considerate. You guys are so considerate with anytime the mirrors get anywhere close to a drive-through or a Starbucks, they're calling friends, seeing who needs what.
Yeah. Oh, so that being the case, that now people are starting to realize, where now everybody is good at everything, and especially at the UFC, Bellator, ACB, PFL level. Really, people know. It's the days of a guy in the back showing another guy how to get out of a triangle before the fight are kind of gone.
Yeah.
You laugh, but I've been there. I've
Really?
been when I first started my career at the UFC level, sitting in the back locker room, watching people give each other like, okay, my guy is good at jiu-jitsu.
Wow.
Do you know how to get out of a triangle? And I'm like watching. I'm like, is anybody else watching this? Holy shit, you're about to go fight in like an hour.
Yeah.
And your guy's good at a move that you're learning how to get out of right now. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, oof, this is
Yeah.
scary,
Yeah.
But those days are gone. Now everybody has a great, game planning as well. Everybody studies video. It's hard now. There's no tricks anymore. Before you could have like a little bit of trickery where, land a wrist lock on somebody because he didn't know what it was. Nowadays, everybody kind of knows what's going on. And now it's coming down to like, okay, well, now it's your aptitude. How good are you at this,
Well, let's talk about what this means for actually not only the flyweight division, but for the bantamweight division as well. First of all, let me tell you what it cost the UFC, and that's a potential super fight between T.J. Dillashaw and Demetrious Johnson. I don't know if they had any plans in place if Johnson and Dillashaw had both won, but I could certainly see that conversation really gaining some steam if DJ had retained his title. because at that point he would have beaten Cejudo twice. The only guy in the top of the rankings, anywhere in the top 5, 6 or so, that would be compelling, just even in the sense that Mighty Mouse had not fought him yet, was Sergio Pettis. Everybody else, you're going to be talking about retreads in terms of Johnson's resume. And then with Dillashaw beating Garbrandt now twice, and I don't know what the current status of Dominic Cruz is here. I mean, that's kind of the mystery guest in terms of the Dillashaw conversation. But this would have been the time to potentially make that super fight. That, of course, now will be off the table. The question is, now Cejudo called out Dillashaw right after the fight. Yeah, said, hey, I'll go.
I don't want to fight Demetrius again.
Right. Yeah. I'll go.
That was smart of him. Because, I mean, realistically, I don't think he won the first one. Or the second one here. I don't think he's winning the third one either. I mean, Demetrius could probably come back and fix that inside trip defense and make sure that doesn't occur. It's just a hard fight, at 125 to beat Demetrius. I still think he's the best guy in the world at it. Even their stance, their striking, they look different. Cejudo is a phenomenal wrestler, obviously gold medal in the Olympics. But like even his stance, his striking, his roundhouse, just off the backside, it looks funny. The power in it's just not necessarily there.
Yeah.
So for him to go ahead and call out one of the other guys to move up to call out TJ, I thought that was a smart move. One, it keeps him the champion a little bit longer at flyweight because he doesn't risk losing his belt. There's always a chance he wins the fight, especially if they judge it off of takedowns. I mean, the guy can pretty much take down, who can't he take down? If you can get Demetrius to the ground and hold him down, you're going to get anybody else in bantamweight to the ground and hold them. And so if they judge heavily on that again, I think that I think TJ could be in trouble with that kind of fight. And if he does lose, he lost to the bantamweight champion, and he took a shot, and he goes back. He's still the flyweight champ.
So Dominic, I was just looking at, poor Dominic. I mean, all the history of the injuries, you always have to ask the question: what
could have?
Yeah, and also is he currently healthy? Because he last fought December 30th, 2016. That was his loss to Garbrandt. He was booked against Jimmy Rivera actually a year to the day after that, December 30th, 2017. But he pulled out of the fight with a broken arm. And I don't know what his current status is, actually, unless I'm sleeping on something. But
no, we were all trying to figure that out that night. We were bringing it up.
Yeah, that was 8 months ago. So let's say, he would certainly have a compelling case to make against Dillashaw. But if Cruz is not ready to go, do you let Henry Cejudo come up and fight Dillashaw, or do you give Dillashaw a bantamweight contender? And really probably the bigger question than all that is, if anybody deserves an immediate title rematch, isn't it Demetrious Johnson?
Yeah, no, I think that if they don't give Demetrious Johnson an immediate rematch, that's kind of bullshit. I think that he's earned it as far as what he's pulled off, what he's done, his credentials as being considered one of the best in the world, probably one of the best ever. We've called it out. I mean, records being set that he set. Losing such a split decision, it wasn't like it was a one-sided, a beating. It was arguably could have gone either way. In most people's cases, I mean, even the judges had it split between them, 2-1 apiece. So if there's ever been a guy who deserves an immediate rematch, it has to be Johnson. If they don't give him the immediate rematch, it just shows you that. And I always know that it has to be about business too, but you always kind of hope there's a balance between business and the spirit of the sport itself of martial arts, of fighting.
You know what, though? I think that, and I know this is the age-old conversation with Demetrius and the business and the pay-per-view numbers and everything, but guess what? You got yourselves a rivalry here. You've got yourselves a trilogy.
Yeah, I think so.
And the UFC has never gone wrong, at least off the top of my head, unless you can think of an example to prove me wrong, has never gone wrong with a high-profile trilogy. I mean, there haven't been a lot of them, first of all. And any time there has been, when I say high-profile, I'm talking like for championships or at least like a top 5 in a division standing. two guys that have fought 3 times has always done money that I can think of, and this would certainly be one of them. I mean, this might be exactly what Demetrious Johnson needed in terms of marketability, which is a foil. Whether or not you definitely like Demetrius in the third fight, the rubber match, but to the fans, I mean, one guy won one guy won the other one. Now it's, that's a very simple concept for fans to understand. And I was just looking, I mean, if the precedent, and this would certainly be the precedent, would be Anderson Silva, because Silva was dominant in the middleweight division like Demetrius was in the flyweight division, and it was Silva's defense record that Demetrius broke. Silva got an immediate rematch against Chris Weidman.
Yeah, and then also, too, look at Ronda Rousey. She didn't necessarily get an immediate rematch, but as soon as she was healthy to fight, she got an immediate title shot.
Right. Conor McGregor. Yeah. I mean, is coming.
Conor McGregor is coming back immediately after a very long layoff as the number one contender facing. So, I mean, it's hard to argue that Demetrius doesn't deserve it unless he wants to take time off and let Cejudo go on and fight. I know that I think that his foot's broke.
I heard he was questioning it. I didn't hear a definitive answer.
I saw crutches.
Well, here's what I think.
A broken bone, 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah, that's not. I mean, if we talk about a fight 6 months from now, a broken foot's not going to keep him out of it.
Yeah. Well, I think then what you have are a number of good possibilities, because you've either got a rematch with Cejudo if DJ needs time off. Cejudo going up and fighting TJ Dillashaw is interesting. And then, because also, I mean, this is also the era of, guys wanting to possess titles in 2 divisions. Conor does it. Now Daniel Cormier's doing it. It would be interesting to see one of the little guys
I think the only way that they allow it to happen is if Demetrius is okay with it. If Demetrius says, hey, I've held this thing for a long time, I'm going to take a year off or whatever. Yeah. Then if Cejudo then can move up and challenge a weight class up, I have no argument for it. But if Demetrius comes out and goes, I want to fight and I want an immediate rematch, that trumps anything Cejudo wants, because Demetrius has put in the work. He's been the champ. He was the first champion, the longest running champion now, tied for the record for the most consecutive wins. I mean, we can go down his accolades of what he's done for the sport, what he is as a representative of the sport. There has to be some kind of he's earned it. I mean, if anybody's earned it, it has to be him.
Yeah. Anything else jump out at you on the card? I tell you, I think I've been sleeping a little bit on Renato Moicano, the guy that beat Cub Swanson. Subbed Cub in the first round, got a performance of the night bonus for it. And, coming in, his only loss was to Brian Ortega. A third-round submission back in July of last year. And, of course, Ortega now is, on deck for a title shot. He was supposed to have it against Max Holloway before Holloway had to pull out of their fight. So I was super impressed with him.
Yeah, because I think the last fight I remember seeing of
Moicano.
I can never pronounce his name. Fuck. Was when he fought Stevens.
Jeremy Stevens had a win over him. Yeah.
But I don't think I remember for some reason, was that the fight that the guy that fought Stevens? I don't think I was overtly impressed with. I was like, I'm going to have to go back and watch the fight again before I speak.
Right. It was a split decision back in April of last year.
Was he very backwards moving in that fight?
I don't remember it much.
I want to think that I remember. I think I had Stevenson winning the fight, Jeremy, because of his aggressiveness, and the effective striking, coming forward, Yeah, I have to go back and we'll have to watch it. I'm going to pull that on Fight Pass.
A very durable fighter in the middleweight division, Thiago Santos is the guy I was going to mention. Fighting Kevin Holland, they kicked off the pay-per-view card. If you remember this fight, Kevin Holland making his UFC debut. This is a guy who went right from right from
Contender, right?
Contender Series to opening a pay-per-view, and Thiago Santos came in with his number 13 middleweight ranking, and it was brought up by the commentators during the fight. This was a classic example of nothing really to gain for Thiago Santos. I mean, expected to win one. It was not easy. It was an exciting fight to watch.
In fact, actually, that kid Kevin Holland, I actually brought him up today at practice. Sometimes there's a part of me that's starting to kind of have that brain that's going like, I'd like to coach that guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if I could coach that guy, I could really, what could I do with that guy?
Yeah.
And watching Holland and seeing his mindset and his athleticism, he has a lot still to develop. But I was extremely impressed with him. I really was. I was actually, I thought he made a great showing of himself. I thought that, a couple fixes in his game, and that guy could really honestly be, a year and a half, 2 years from now, that guy could be somebody who is, right near a title shot, you know, because of again, like he athletically has it, he mentally already has it, he already has that kind of confidence, and his tool chest is not complete. He has some dangerous things in his tool chest right now, but he has a lot of gaps in his game. There's a lot of things I saw that he did wrong. I'm like, shit, that was ugly. Mm-hmm. But I saw the potential there, and I was very impressed with it. And in fact, I thought that it wasn't brought up enough, listening to the commentary, that I'm like, hey, guys, does anybody else notice the guy Thiago after the first round is exhausted trying to beat this guy up? He was gassed. I mean, that's why he started shooting and taking him down, because he couldn't put that guy away. He was tough, So, and now he's tough on top of everything else that I said. Mm-hmm. So, they're right in the sense that Thiago did kind of hurt his, I think his status a little bit. And it might also help him, though. I think some of the people that look at his stature, he's so intimidating to look at. You look at the guy and he's like an alpha male. You're like, man, this is, if I have to design a fighter, this guy looks, like a world-class athlete. Mm-hmm. But seeing that his gas tank and some of the mistakes he was making with with all the experience he already has, if I was some of the other middleweights, I think if maybe I was hesitant to fight him before, I think now I'd be licking my chops going, you know what, let me go ahead and jump on this guy before everybody else realizes too. It's always that situation that happens when people go, oh man, this guy's, unbeatable. He's, incredible. And all of a sudden people get exposed. And I think that Holland wasn't good enough to completely expose Thiago, but I saw things that exposed it. I was like, oh, I see a bunch of holes here too. Yeah. For a guy who's as touted as he is, no one of the top 5 wants to face him. I'm like, oh, fuck, if you give me any of the top 5 guys, we'll talk. I'll tell you how to beat this guy in one round.
Good night of fights all the way around, and the main and the co-main definitely did not disappoint. Now, news was made outside of the octagon as well, because prior to the weigh-ins, the UFC held their now traditional, I guess you would call it a seasonal or quarterly press conference. They've gotten to the last couple of years where they do these press conferences that basically preview the next 2 or 3 months worth of fights at a time. And the big news was that Conor McGregor is coming back. He's booked October 6th to take on Khabib Nurmagomedov, headlining here in Las Vegas. It's going to be a title shot for the lightweight title. Of course, McGregor's been away. Titles were stripped. This is the fight that we've talked about for so long, being to my recollection, the worst possible matchup for Conor McGregor.
It is.
First of all, I guess pretty impressive that he's willing to take the worst possible matchup coming back after being away as long as he has. It's going to be a big money fight for him, of course. But I believe he is, he's pretty much opening as an underdog, not a huge underdog, and that could change.
It'll change.
But thoughts on that fight? I mean, going any differently than Khabib Nurmagomedov ragdolling you left and right around the octagon?
If right now we're putting money on it, my safe money's on Khabib. Do I think it's interesting for the fact that there's still that one, out of the 26 fights, that just shows you how good Khabib is. Mm-hmm. Out of 26 fights, I did see Michael Johnson land one straight left and it kind of hurt him.
Yeah.
And if Conor lands that same straight left, Khabib's going to go to sleep. You know what I mean? Like that left that Conor has, that straight left puts everybody
power
on queer street,
and lightning fast.
Well, maybe that's a knockout Khabib, but it's going to hurt him, and that could really change the outcome of a round and cause some problems. That being said, but you got to think that Khabib knows that the straight left coming down the middle is the only shot that really Conor has to really win the fight and early. If that's a lot that Conor has to hope lines up. You know, if I was Khabib, just grind him at first round, avoid the just clinch him. Don't even take a shot. Clinch with him, walk him against the cage. You can make it ugly if you want. Grind him, because we know that Conor has those really high octane anaerobic type musculature, which allows him to be extremely powerful and quick, but he burns out. We've seen it in fights before where if he gets in those grinding fights, like he did in the second fight with Nate Diaz, in the third round, he was backpedaling. He looked like he was ready to fall on his face. And Nate Diaz can't put the same amount of pressure that Khabib can put on him, So if he thought that was bad, it's going to be worse. So, yeah, I think that it's going to be, it's a pretty, I think, safe bet to say that, it's a Khabib fight. Conor does have that one, that puncher's chance. If anybody has it, it's him. I don't, it's funny when people are trying to use Ale Quinta went 5 rounds, with, Khabib. And I was like, yeah, but Ale Quinta's actually much more well-rounded than Conor is. If right now Khabib or, Conor and Ale Quinta would have a grappling match or a wrestling match, whether it would be submission grappling on the ground or a wrestling match on their feet, Ale Quinta wins in both those, he's a well-rounded fighter on top of a pretty good striker, very good hands. So I don't know if that's not really the great analogy to make there. If anything, I would sit there and go back to the fight, looking at how money shot Chad.
Chad Mendes.
Mendes.
Money shot. That'd be a good nickname for him. He should have gone with that.
Chad Mendes.
Should have just stopped at money.
Yeah. Well, it was money shot.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they made him change it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was money shot.
Oh.
Because of wrestling, he had a money shot,
Yeah.
But because of obviously the pornographic,
not
a lot of people wrestle in college to go, oh, he has a money shot, what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what, at least that's what he told me. I don't know if it was always a joke that it always had the but because obviously you can't say money shot and not make people think of what we're all thinking about right now.
Right.
So they took out the shot part.
Okay.
They asked him to cut that out. So it was money shot.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at Chad took him down I think twice in both rounds, right? And the problem is if Mendes took him down, Khabib's taking him down. The difference is that when Mendes got on top of him, Mendes had a 2-week camp. He wasn't in great shape. He wasn't able to put any heat on him once he got him down. I don't think anybody in the world thinks that Conor can survive underneath of Khabib on the ground. I mean, and that's nothing against Conor. I don't know anybody in the lightweight division besides possibly, Tony Ferguson. That was the fight that I would have found intriguing to be on the bottom of Khabib, because Ferguson's jiu-jitsu and his limbs, he's so long. I'm like, well, man, he's sick with those darces and guillotines. This might be interesting. You know what I mean? Like, you've perked my curiosity. Whereas, Conor on the bottom, he's just trying to get back up to his feet. And, he's going to take a beating, like which most guys, everybody else, the 26 people that he's faced, when they end up on the bottom of Khabib, it takes a beating. He's one of the best in the world, if not the best at ground and pound. He probably has the most vicious ground and pound that I can. Can you think of anybody else that's more vicious on top of you?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and he's one of these guys too, Khabib, that you just think about how long we've been talking about him, like how long we've been talking about this level of dominance.
Well, and he still has to make weight though.
Well, there's the making the weight, and there's injuries that he's dealt with. It's taken him a lot long. I kind of feel like we're having a conversation that naturally we should have been having a number of years ago in terms of him becoming champion and then dominating challengers. But
because he's been in the UFC almost 5 years now, right?
Yeah.
I remember when he first came over, the Fertitas and stuff, because I think I was over at Keith Cleven's, and he had to do some of his rehab there for his knee surgery. And, obviously the UFC was taking care of it. And that's when I first heard about him. At that point, he was extremely highly touted, and everybody knew that he was going to be the next best thing. And because of injuries and whatnot. And just, you're right, it's been a much slower, claim to fame than somebody with his accolades and his abilities probably should have been. The missed weights, and then, back and forth, and then not only some issues that were his fault, the weight issues, and then, opponents getting injured and pulling out, not his fault, but, all compounded together has prolonged, his career. Any
surprise on your part that Conor McGregor gets a plea deal in New York for throwing dollies and all is forgiven right away from the UFC standpoint?
I think everybody in the U.S. knows money solves all problems.
Yeah. I don't think it's much of a surprise there either. Yeah. Let's turn our attention to Bellator here, your current home, before we wrap this one up, because they made some big news. They've, on the heels of their very successful heavyweight tournament, which is still ongoing, they are now ready to embark on a welterweight tournament. That is another division where they are rich with talent, and the brackets have been announced. So on the left side of the bracket, commencing with a fight between Douglas Lima and Andrei Koreskov on September 29th. The other pairing on that side of the bracket is going to be Paul Daly and Michael Venom Page. That's an exciting matchup.
That's extremely exciting.
Yeah, for sure. Then over on the other side of the bracket, you've got Neiman Gracie is going to be taking on Ed Ruth, and Rory McDonald and John Fitch, a couple of UFC alums there.
Man, that's a rough fight for Rory to take the first round on.
Yeah.
Fitch is just a pain in the ass to fight, man.
Yeah. Your alternate fight, there is an alternate fight between Lorenz Larkin and Marslov Amsov. Oh. That's a tough one to pronounce. I'm a little surprised that Larkin is in an alternate fight and not, although...
The guy fighting Lima, I didn't quite know right off the bat.
Andrei Koreskov.
Are you familiar with him?
Yeah, I'm familiar with him. Honestly, the thing that surprised me a little bit is maybe not putting Larkin either in probably the Neiman Gracie spot, maybe against Ed Ruth. But then again, you got the Gracie name, and I don't know. It's fine either way. I mean, look, sometimes those alternate fights really turn into something. Let's just not forget that Daniel Cormier started out as the alternate in the Strikeforce Grand Prix and ended up winning the whole thing. But that's a
solid tournament, man.
It's a solid tournament.
Ed Ruth is somebody I'm interested to see how he's going to do.
Yeah. It's a solid tournament. It's good stuff for Bellator. It'll build momentum and a lot of anticipation. Hey, there's Bella walking on set there for a minute. You just made a brief appearance there.
Cameo.
Like Bob Hope used to do on The Tonight Show, a little before your time.
Before my time.
It was a little before your time. Yeah. They used to, on The Tonight Show, this was when Johnny Carson would host it. I used to see this as a kid. What would happen is they'd be right in the middle of the show, and Bob Hope had basically an open invitation to walk on the show anytime, right in the middle of it. They'd be right in the middle of having a guest on whatever, and all of a sudden you'd hear, da, 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 and the music would kick in, and Bob Hope would just walk onto the set, usually with a putter over his shoulder for some strange reason, like a golf club, and he would just make a surprise appearance. If we had a bigger budget, we could do that with someone. It would be fun to have. We should think about who the ultimate random mystery guest would be. That we would just. What we would do is we would just employ them, and they would get paid every episode, but we would only use them periodically, and it will always be a big surprise when they walked on. My vote's for Mark the Hammer Coleman.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. If you remember where to come on the show.
Yeah. just have him kind of wander, show up periodically, randomly in the background and say hello. Do you know he has figured in, strangely, to the Congressman Jim Jordan scandal? Are you familiar with this?
The Ohio guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was okay with the we were just talking about this.
Oh, yeah?
Or I was. Yeah. We were sitting there talking about how, because, the sex scandal with the Olympic or the U.S. gymnastics team.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That asshole.
Yep.
And then now you have this guy where it's like, it's bad no matter what when someone gets sexually assaulted. But I can see why, as a man, and you're supposed to be you're a young male who's an alpha male, who's a wrestler, you're the epitome of, old Greek warfare, wrestling, collegiate style at Ohio, a tough top college for wrestling. And some guy touches you inappropriately that's supposed to be one of the guys on the team, and not saying something and because of shame. I get that. You know what I mean? I can relate to that, to where I'm like, yeah, I can, if someone said, why I didn't come forward immediately, I'm like, I get that. If you're a 21-year-old guy, you might not want to tell people and be like, I'd just rather just go away and just don't talk about this.
Also, at the hands of somebody that everyone around you is building up as some sort of, example. I mean, that was the whole problem with Penn State, that those guys, those football coaches were considered heroes.
It actually helped me in this situation, because I think until I read about this story, I never understood or never had enough empathy or understanding for why a woman would not immediately go to authorities if somebody, sexual misconduct, right? I'm like, when you hear these stories of girls waiting so long because, they were shame. And it's like, kind of sounds like now you just want money. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of fell into that category. I'm like, if it bothered you so much, why didn't you say something? Why'd you wait 15 years to say something, you know? But then now that it happened to the boys, and I can kind of obviously I can relate more with a man, I'm sitting there going, well, I don't know what I would do. I don't know if I got sexually touched as a young man, and sit there and go, that would be a very shameful conversation to have with an authority. And then knowing that now you're going to have to go to court and you have to testify. Everybody's going to know that you're the guy that, it's like, yeah, that's kind of embarrassing, that whole ordeal. I can see now why, as a woman, you just want it to go away. You're like, I'm not going to say anything, And then when other women do step forward, not so much that you're jumping on the bandwagon, but it's like, yes, I want justice, but I just don't want to stand here by myself and be the only one under the microscope. Yeah, I'll come forward, but there's strength in numbers. Well, so I get it. I guess like that actually helped me understand be more empathetic towards the plight.
Well, I should explain that the way Mark Coleman is figuring into this is Mark Coleman says there's no way that Jim Jordan didn't know about this. And Coleman was a Jordan backer. Like, it's not like he's got a vendetta against this guy or anything like
he'd
that.
Go back there for years. Yeah. I mean, there's fights he fought in the UFC that he'd go back there and train in the wrestling room.
But apparently he's saying, no, let's be honest. This was something that people knew about. So interesting just to see his name pop
Coleman
up.
Wrestled there the late 80s, right? Early 90s? Late 80s?
I would think it would be late 80s.
Yeah.
But it was just interesting to see his name pop up in like a article you're reading on the AP. There's Mark Coleman's name.
Yeah. In fact, actually, when it happened, it made me think of the monster, Kevin Randleman.
Yeah.
Because I know Kevin had issues with sexual abuse as a child. And he talks about it on interviews, where that, kind of what drove him into wrestling and being a fighter. So I sat there and wondered, I'm like, oh, shit. Then he goes to a college where there's a sexual predator there. I wonder if something ever happened to him, or obviously now it's too late to ask him.
Yeah.
But I wonder, like, if what could have happened, or what would he have said about the situation?
Yeah.
Because he wrestled there in the early '90s, so he was there during that era.
Yeah. Have you seen the Joe Paterno movie they made? HBO made with Al Pacino playing Joe Paterno. It's interesting. I mean, the common thread with all that, and this is what stops that kind of stuff dead in its tracks, is that at the point in time that something like that becomes discovered, nothing is more important.
Yeah,
nothing. Everything stops. We're not talking about fights anymore. We're not talking about wrestling. We're not talking about winning football yet. That all just stopped. And all of a sudden, we have to deal with this. And you see in that film, the moment you start wrestling, pardon the pun, but I mean, the moment you start wrestling with it, where it's like, well, here's a little justification here, a little justification there. Well, we don't really know. Anything that gets us to the next big game or the next big tournament, or the thing that, let's win that game, and then of course we're going to address it.
Yeah, and I think there's certain things.
You start making those deals with yourself.
Now, there has to be certain aspects of your morality. There's a hard line drawn in the sand, and the part that I can't relate with Paterno and some of the coaching staff is that they're saying that we were aware of maybe some things being brought to our attention. we pass that on to the proper people above us, and we don't know what. And I'm like, that's where you lose me. I'm like, no, that's not good enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would be the equivalent of me knowing that if my neighbor was raping his child. And I'm like, well, I called the police. They didn't do much about it. Well, then take it a step further. Do something about it. Like that's a human life that something bad is happening to. It's as part of the race, you have to try to keep doing something. I mean, I realize at a certain point you don't put yourself maybe in physical harm. If I see someone pull a gun on somebody, it's like, well, I might not necessarily intervene. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not getting into a gunfight for you. Shit. I'm not gonna. I don't know you well enough to die for you. But at the same time, if you see something like that, it's like, like the one assistant coach. That guy really honestly bothered me the most out of everybody. From what and obviously, I mean, I follow the story as closely as probably most. But I mean, I if I took a test on it, I'm not going to get a 100%. But the one assistant coach that that said he walked into the bathroom and he actually heard the noise and looks around and sees Sandusky, basically sodomizing a child, a 12-year-old or 11-year-old kid at the time, right? And he says he didn't know what to do, so he left. And I'm like, fuck, you didn't know what to do, like. I'm thinking most people would be shout out, what the fuck? Even if you don't have the personality to become physically violent, stop, make it apparent that, hey, I'm sitting here watching you, like, what are you doing? You can embarrass and shame him to get the situation to stop. And then, then you go to your father. Like I even said that, to my wife. I was saying, I'm like, man, if my son or daughter ever came to me and said that they saw this situation and didn't know what they should have done and didn't know how to handle it properly, I think I failed as a father. Like, wow, fuck, you don't really know what to do. You saw this happening and you didn't know what to do. Yeah. Really? Like,
No. That's the problem when you build up these cultures of it's not unlike organized religion. It's not unlike what you saw in the Catholic Church. When you elevate these people to this level of something a little better than mere mortals, hero worship, then that's culturally part of the problem. And you see that in the film too, where people were so defensive of Paterno. Even like he was the one being wronged in all this until the evidence really became clear.
Before you go on. Yeah. I think that's becoming less of a problem because everybody talks about the negativity of social media.
Yeah.
I think one of the positive turns on social media is that because we get to know people more and because of the way the news outlets are now, everybody has a camera on their phone. So many things are seen. So many people are more seen as mortal that were considered before because of their ability to sing and dance and catch a football. Were considered, better than the rest of us. I think now people are realizing that we're all human. Some of us have talents that others don't. But at the end of the day, we're all still human. And I think it kind of kills that a little bit.
That's a good point. Yeah,
I think it brings us closer in contact to realize that, a Justin Bieber, you can see the moronic things at times he does, but which I think is pretty normal for if you were to give a teenager millions of dollars and make them as famous as that. Is there going to be some issues? I'm like, yeah, if I get 100 kids at his age and give him the money and the fame that he has, it's probably not going to be a good thing. It's probably going to not work out for the best. Whereas I think if this was 20 years ago, we would never have heard about and seen some of the mistakes that that some of our so-called heroes would have made.
Yeah, and they also sort of because of mass exposure to social media, a lot of times, but by the point in time that you get caught doing something bad, you've kind of documented your own would be like a paper trail. You can kind of go, a lot of times you just go through somebody's Twitter timeline. You're like, oh yeah, here was this sign, here was that picture, here was that statement. They had obviously a long history of doing that.
We got to talk about it. About the guy, the writer for the creator of the Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yes. Yeah.
What was your take on that?
I don't know that I looked closely enough at it, but I tell you what, ask me that next week, and I'll have an opinion about it. Yeah,
I'm starting to really think that we're kind of taking this whole PC thing, and
well, that's the thing. You got to be careful.
Far,
no, the thing is, I mean, it's always a balancing act. You've got to be very careful about. I mean, increased attention on it, like you just said, is a good thing, but at the same time, that means there's all the more importance placed on governing that and making sure that is not abused, because there's always opportunists. There's always opportunists that'll come along and try to take advantage. Speaking of taking advantage, though, Frank, something that is perfectly acceptable to take advantage of is the Amazon banner on the front of phoneboothfighting.com. Why is that? Well, for more on that, here's you.
Here's me. Well, it's a very easy way to help us out here at the show. If you do all your shops for your wants and your needs, just go through Amazon. Go through the banner on our webpage at phoneboothfighting.com. By clicking through that Amazon banner, it goes through a portal. At no extra charge to you, a small percentage of all your purchases come back to us.
More important than ever before to support this little podcast by clicking through the Amazon banner. We much appreciate it. Also, you can order official show merchandise. That benefits the show as well by going to phoneboothfighting.com. Click on the store tab, and you'll see our fine selection of T-shirts and designs and autograph posters and some other stuff that is up there. Also, something you can do that won't cost you a penny is go to iTunes, look up Phone Booth Fighting. First of all, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. But even if you're already subscribed through iTunes or any other avenue, click those 5 stars on iTunes. That's beneficial to us. Give us that 5-star review. Take a moment or two and write a favorable line in the review section. We like to read those on the air. Remember, we are available absolutely free of charge and twice weekly, not only in iTunes, but on our Phone Booth Fighting YouTube channel, which is a great way to see the guests and the production value in studio and not just hear them. Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, basically anywhere where podcasts are available. Tell a friend. That is how we grow this thing, one organic listener at a time. So I guess I only have you to thank for this episode. No guests on this one because we had a lot of fights to talk. So thanks to the fighters for fighting. And on behalf of Frank Mir, I'm Richard Hunter, and we'll see you right back here next time on Phone Booth Fighting.